Hey ladies and gents, this video is about angle pair relationships, and we're going to be looking at special pairs of angles that are formed when two lines intersect. So we've actually talked about two types of special angle relationships, and those types of angles would be complementary and supplementary. So go ahead and jot down this little quick review, warm up, whatever you would call it. And go ahead and see if you can figure out what the measure of angle A would be and what the measure of angle C would be based on that given information. And then when you're ready, you can go ahead and resume the video. So we know complementary angles add to 90 degrees, supplementary angles add to 180 degrees, which means that if angle B is 72 degrees, angle A would be 18 degrees, and angle C would be 108 degrees. Okay, there is a bunch of new vocabulary for this section, so go ahead and make this same type of chart we've been making all throughout our notebook. The first word is vertical angles. Vertical angles are two angles whose sides form two pairs of opposite rays. And you can see from the picture right here, the little red angles that I've indicated would be considered vertical angles. Another way that you could think about this type of angle pair relationship is their sides forming opposite rays. Well, we know two pairs of opposite rays. This is basically going to just form a straight line. So those angles would be congruent, or you can say that their measures are equal. The second vocabulary word is adjacent angles, and some of you may already know what this means. Adjacent angles have a common side and a common vertex. And here's a picture of two adjacent angles right here. They do not need to be equal, they do not need to be complementary, supplementary, they don't need to have any type of special relationship necessarily, but they are always right next to each other because they share a common side and vertex. A linear pair, this is going to look familiar to some of you because we've learned the word supplementary. Linear pair are two angles who are adjacent and whose non-common sides are opposite rays. So whenever you're dealing with a linear pair, you want to find the common side. That would be this side here. That's how we know that they're adjacent, because they share that common side. And the non-common sides, I'll do this in green, the non-common sides form a pair of opposite rays. So basically it forms a straight line. And we know that any two angles that form a straight line are supplementary. They add up to be 180 degrees. So this is just a new vocabulary word to describe this relationship, because you can have supplementary angles that are not adjacent, but adjacent supplementary angles are always called a linear pair. Alright, take a second to go ahead and jot down this example, and when you've got the diagram, click resume so that we can go through some true-false questions for this picture. So the first thing that we want to notice is any type of special symbol. So whenever you get a diagram that has many angles, we should always be looking for arc marks or right angle marks that will tell us if there's congruent angles or right angles or any special type of angle pair. So the first thing that I notice is that angle 4 is 90 degrees. So I would mark that just so I'm aware. The other thing that I notice is that there are some lines going through a common vertex. So here's one line. And here's another line. That is important to note because we just learned two new vocabulary words that create a straight line. So I'm going to look first at angles 1 and 2 because that's our first question. Angles 1 and 2 are a linear pair. So if I look at these two angles, angle 1 and angle 2, they're not the same, so I'm going to mark them with different arc. So I put 2 arcs on angle 2, 1 arc on angle 1. Because they share a common side and their non-common sides are opposite rays, this would be true. Those are a linear pair. They're also supplementary. 4 and 5 are a linear pair, true or false? 4 and 5 are adjacent, they share a common side, but if I look at their non-common sides, that'd be this green one and this blue one here, those non-common sides are not opposite rays because they're not going in completely opposite directions, even though they do have a common vertex. So because these are not opposite rays, 4 and 5 are not a linear pair. C says angle 5 and angle 3 are vertical angles. So 5 is here, 3 is here. The easiest way to do this is to look for the letter X to be created by those two angles. If it creates an X, then they're likely vertical. So angle 5 and angle 3 have one pair of opposite rays, but angle 3 is created by this side, which I've highlighted in blue. Angle 5 is created by this side, which is not an opposite ray with this ray. So even though it has one set of opposite rays, they're not both pairs of opposite rays. So angle 5 and angle 3 are not vertical angles. Another way you could think of this is they're not directly across from each other, like angles 1 and 3. Angles 1 and 3 have the blue opposite rays and the green opposite rays. So because their sides are both opposite rays, angles 1 and 3 would be vertical angles. Last one, angles 1 and 4. Just like we were talking about with 3 and 5. Angle 1 has one side that I've highlighted in blue. Angle 4 has one side that I've highlighted in blue, but angle 1 has this green ray. Angle 4 does not have the opposite ray to this. So these would not be vertical angles because the sides of their angles are not both opposite rays. And they're not directly across from one another. Using the same diagram from above that you just drew in your notebook, go ahead and jot down these questions and see how far you can get on your own. Part E might be a little bit tricky, so if you need to, go through A through D and then click play when you're ready to resume and check your answers. Okay, name a pair of supplementary angles. So we know that supplementary angles add up to be 180 degrees. So there's two possible answers here because there's two linear pairs. So either angles 1 and 2 or angles 2 and 3 would be considered supplementary because those are considered a linear pair. Part B, name a pair of complementary angles. So two angles that add to be 90 degrees. This would be angles 1 and angles 5. So let me hop back up to my picture here. Because we know that angle 4 is 90 degrees, I know that 1, 5, and 4 are going to all be adding up to be 180 because their sides here create a straight line. So if angle 4 is 90 degrees, I know that angles 1 plus angle 5 has to be 90 degrees, which is how I know that they're complementary. 2, 3, or 1 and 2, we don't know what their measures are, but we know that they don't add up to 90. So the only acceptable answer for this would be angle 1 and angle 5. If the measure of angle 1 is 65 degrees, find the measure of angle 3. So we've already talked about this at the top section in the true false. These two angles are vertical angles, and anytime you have vertical angles, they are congruent. So there's actually no calculations to do here. If angle 1 is 65 degrees, then the measure of angle 3 is 65 degrees. Done. Question D, if the measure of angle 2 is 123, find the measure of angle 3. Again, we kind of talked up top there that these angles are considered a linear pair, which means they're supplementary. So angle 3 has to be 57 degrees. Part E is asking us about angles 1 and 2. So if you look up above at our true false, that was like question A. Angles 1 and 2 are a linear pair, which means they add to be 180 degrees. So I need to set up an equation by adding these two together. Whoops. Just x minus 5. So add angle 1 plus angle 2 to equal 180. Go ahead and solve for x. So if you solve this correctly, you should get a value of x of 44.5. You can always check this by taking this value and plugging it back in to your original equation where we see x, and the total of those two angles should equal 180 degrees. Example 3. I'm going to get you started and then I want you to go ahead and finish this one on your own. If the measure of angle 2 is 52 degrees, find all the other missing angles. So angle 1, angle 3, angle 4. Go ahead and jot down your thoughts, and then we'll review this in class when you come back, and we'll talk about it and see if you have any questions. Example 4 is a little different, so this one uses algebra. Use this diagram to solve for x and y. So a couple of things that I would notice in this diagram, the 115 degrees would be vertical with that angle there. And so we just talked about a special relationship that vertical angles have. And then the 115 degrees and this angle here with the y, those two angles have a special relationship that we just talked about as well. So go ahead and work out this problem, see what you get for x and y, and we will go over this one in class as well. A couple of big conclusions that you should be taking away from this video. Vertical angles are always congruent, linear pairs are always supplementary, and supplementary angles add to 180. So therefore, linear pairs add to 180. We already know complementary angles add to 90, so that's just an additional angle pair that we could throw in here. All right? Hope this video helped you guys out. If you still need some more help, go ahead and click the link right here. That will take you to another video, and you can practice a couple more vertical angles and linear pair problems.